Released back in 2012, Double Dragon Neon, while partially being a parody of the series, let's not forget that, attempts to be the shot in the arm that the franchise desperately needed after lying dormant since the beginning of the 3D era. A stylish coat of paint, funky fresh music, voice acting, online play, and even a pseudo level up system all made the cut. Neon should have been the definitive Double Dragon game. But wouldn't you know that just a few years later, the series would go back to its 8-bit roots with Double Dragon 4. Despite the fact that Super Double Dragon was essentially 4, and Double Dragon 5 is most certainly a thing that exists. So does that mean that Neon just wasn't good enough? Released in arcades as far back as 1987, yeah, we're literally talking decades now, the original Double Dragon was the second beat-em-up ever made. Depending on your definition of beat-em-up. But it was definitely one of the founding pillars of the genre. But despite that, it hasn't aged all that gracefully, and realistically, it hasn't garnered that much of a following with younger audiences. I doubt we'll be seeing the Lee brothers jumping out of the battle bus anytime soon. So clearly the return to its 8-bit roots was just for the sake of nostalgia, to appease the old guard. Does liking this make me a boomer? And to that extent, Double Dragon Neon does just that. It's a classic co-op arcade-style brawler. Enemies show up, you knock them down. Rinse and repeat. Bust out some fun weapons and some amusing stage hazards for good measure, and it's just like old times. But, on the other hand, ironically, Neon shines its brightest when it just drops the Double Dragon namesake, does its own thing, and cranks the crazy up past 11. And thankfully, it doesn't take that long to get there. Though prepare for a wave of deja vu as the game opens up with a pretty familiar scene.
Welcome, Punch!
And once again, it's up to the Lee brothers to save the girl by basically beating down every punk, thug, and ninja that dares to cross them. And at first glance, you'd think that we're back in the early 90s. You'd think. Despite the obvious 3D facelift, everything seems to be pretty much the same. Par for the course. That is until we get to the end of Stage 2. Where... I'm just gonna let the game speak for itself here. That's right, screw the cliched street gangs and crime organizations that dominated old school brawlers. Neon goes full Saturday morning cartoon.
Live the code of the dragon. Fight for right, the might of the dragon. With the mark of the dragon. Live the code of the dragon.
Oh god, the fact that I watched this at all proves that I'm old. A massive space base, mutant clones, Okay, look. This is a short game, but there is so much more to it. But the moments of sheer stupid awesomeness are definitely the highlights of the game, so in good conscience, I can't go spoiling them all. But if the plant from Little Shop of Horrors,
Feed me sea malt.
with a T-Rex for an arm that shoots lasers doesn't sell it for you, then I don't know what will. And I'm not even going to tell you what the other arm becomes, because that would just be doing you a disservice. Though, I guess if you really need to know, feel free to check out my long play of the game over on my long play channel, link in the description. All of which leads up to a flashy, over-the-top final battle with the mastermind behind it all, Skeletor. Yeah, I don't care if the names are technically different, this is 100% Skeletor. And his banter is hilarious.
Behold, Lee brothers, my least vincible creation, this giant tank.
Good thing I trained for this. Time to use
my anti-tank techniques.
Same with all the basic enemies, and especially the Lee brothers, who are complete idiots in this continuity. Yeah, gone is the serious tone of the older games, and I am here for it. The humor in this game is easily one of the best aspects, and I would be damned if this wasn't the continuity that actually teamed up with the Battletoads. Please, somebody! Battletoads, Double Dragon Neon, make it happen. The music is also a blast from the past, in more ways than one. Of course, we've got the obligatory remixes of some of the most iconic beats from the original games, all of which are already proven to be perfect tracks for a classic beatdown. But the new music is no slouch either, offering up fast-paced beats for epic beatings, alongside jams that would feel right at home in an early 90s action flick. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention the credits song that gives Still Alive from Portal, yeah, Portal, a run for its money. And honestly, it still kind of feels fresh to have a reboot that takes advantage of modern tech without dragging the characters into modern times, with things like cell phones or the internet. The visuals are fantastic too. Bright, colorful, absurd. The backgrounds and environments especially stand out with a more hand-drawn approach to them. The characters also have great designs, though they do have that early 360 PS3 aesthetic to them that kind of clashes. The time when games were just starting to shift over from polymodeling to 3D sculpting, for those of you who get that. It's not a deal breaker by any means, but it is a symptom of the times. So, if the music rocks, everything looks great, the game is hilarious, what's the problem? Well, as hinted at, Double Dragon Neon's biggest issue is the fact that it's a Double Dragon game. And let me be crystal clear, Neon 100% feels like a Double Dragon game. And depending on who you ask, that hasn't really been a good thing since the Heroes in a Half Shell redefined what beat 'em up should be in the late 80s, which is to say, smooth and fast. While not as absurd as having the punch and kick buttons swap depending on what direction you're facing, combat in Neon is slow and the controls just feel stiff. The dragons still feel heavier than they really should be, and the wind up to start running is just ugh. None of which is helped by the fact that so many enemies have super armor, basically attacks you can't break them out of, which are so much harder to dodge than they should be due to the aforementioned sluggishness of our heroes. Basically, brawlers like Castle Crashers, which came out the same generation as Neon, but years prior, really showcased how the genre had moved forward with faster, smoother combat. And while one could argue that the slower pace is what makes Double Dragon, giving it its own identity, at that point it really does become more of a question of taste, as well as how much of a detriment one's own identity can be. A conversation, or let's be real here, a debate, that I'm not really gonna get into, as it really does just boil down to one's own personal feelings on the matter. That said though, it's not like there hasn't been any improvements to the formula. While fast movements may be a bit more of a hassle than they really should be, successful ducks and dodges will give the Lee brothers a power boost for a short while. You have the ability to completely wreck downed enemies now. Oh, that is satisfying. And cracking foes with pipes and bats feel as amazing as ever. Plus, there are some fun and weird new weapons to play with. The co-op especially got some love with the addition of online, something that the creators at WayForward suspiciously left out of another of their beat-em-ups that they made years later. Why no, I won't let them live that down. Ever. And if you are playing co-op, which you totally should be, as co-op is arguably the biggest selling point of any brawler, they added in the ability to share or take health from your bro, as well as give them a res when they're down. A mechanic that I love seeing in all beat-em-ups now. But by far, the biggest addition has to be the level up system, adding in RPG elements to the franchise in a similar fashion to that of its big brother, River City Ransom, via collectibles. Throughout your run, enemies will drop cassette tapes. It's like a physical MP3 or Spotify list for you younger viewers not watching this. You can have one of each equipped, and there are 20 in total to find. What's weird about it though is how they level up. Each tape gets stronger the more you collect of them, but enemies seemingly drop them at random. Now, you can buy tapes at the stores, but the stores are located in the middle of specific levels. so you basically have to replay the levels in order to get the ones you want if you want to max them out. On top of that, each tape has a limit cap of 10, unless of course you take them to the tape forge. Okay, really playing up the heavy metal theme here. This allows you to boost those limit caps even further, but the catch is, you need mithril to do it. Which can only be obtained by beating bosses, which there are not enough of in a single playthrough to pull off. Though yes, you can go back and replay any level whenever you want. Realistically, the game wants you to use those power-ups in harder difficulty runs that you unlock after beating the game. And honestly, unless you are a hardcore Double Dragon fan, I really don't see that happening. And it's not because Double Dragon Neon just isn't good enough. Double Dragon Neon is a fun and solid beat 'em up that, despite how much it strays away from its legacy, still does the series proud. It's just that the biggest wow moments and comedy only really hit hard once. It didn't evolve the series much beyond its roots, and like most beat 'em ups, the game will get monotonous if stretched out for too long, which thankfully the game doesn't at roughly 2 hours to beat. Neon may be a short ride, but it is a fun and zany one with so many ups and downs. If you can overlook slower, arguably older combat styles, then you are in for a hilarious treat that is absolutely best shared with a friend. And seriously, WayForward, you teased us with Neon cameos in River City Girls. I want to see the dragons return in a game of that style. Talk to Rare, make it happen, Battletoads Double Dragon Neon. Do it!